I'm Douglas Katz, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
I love it, man. So first off, veterans always trying to support one another, and I appreciate you coming on and allowing me to satisfy my charter, but also allow you to do what we do, and that is look out for one another. So thanks for coming on the show, man. And I'm interested in talking to you because there's so many ways. Like, when you go through the military academy, right? You're nowhere near where you are now.
No.
I mean, just in case you didn't know. All of the things that go into graduating from that school. For me, I was a combat spy, and so day to day on the ground work, trying to understand commanders, trying to find information. It's a zillion miles from where I am now. So how do you reconcile, like, oh, I'm going to go into the knife making business? Like, how did you get over that hurdle? And we'll just go from there. And
it was 100% sort of accidental and organic. I'm a hobby guy. I love doing things. I get bored kind of easily, super ADD. I should have told you that before the interview so you could keep me on track. But my wife had given me a gift of a handmade knife from a guy named Steve Marney, super awesome guy here in Chicago, but he also taught classes. So she bought me another gift later on for me and my son to go through that course together. So I started making knives, and when we moved, it was something I really wanted to do. So we really specifically looked for a house that had a shop where I could set up and have a forge. And understand, I was not a mechanical builder, anything creator before that, maker, I guess. And I have upper extremity issues myself. I was having some particular issues at that point. Couldn't swing a hammer to make a regular knife. I love to cook. It was just affecting me pretty badly. I ended up having to get my shoulder rebuilt after that. But in the time being, I was like, I need something better. And I was kind of out playing around in my shop, and I keep a lot of scrap metal out there. And there was a circular saw blade, and I knew of some different kind of knives out there. And I started playing with shapes, and that was the first prototype of the NULU. And it's ugly. There's pictures of it on our Kickstarter. It looks like it was made by like some primitive guy on an island trying to survive after a shipwreck. But with the help of my team, and I built an amazing team, it turned into what it is today, which is really a beautiful, elegantly designed knife that helps people. So it's been a long journey over the past couple of years, but it's been, again, kind of organic, just sort of like, okay, people are getting it, they get on board, they see the vision, and they're joining. So when I say built a team, it's sort of more like people coming on and joining and becoming part of what we're trying to do than me actively seeking them out.
Yeah. So one of the things that we realize, as we go through these military experiences is, sure, knife making, I can sort that out. Sure, I can put 2,000 people on a ship. Sure, I can provision people indefinitely while they're all these things that we didn't know we knew how to do. We know how to do. And then when you apply these skills to something like being an entrepreneur, I'm sure you didn't go through any entrepreneur classes when you're going through your military training, but you end up going.
I would argue, and I don't mean
let me hear it.
I would argue that the military is entrepreneur training, and that a lot of people who have been through that experience undervalue that, right? Like, people gravitate to.
Well, and I think we agree on this. I mean, because where I was going is I do know how to build a team. I do know how to find experts. I do know how to do, and all of a sudden you realize I am an entrepreneur.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and I think it's interesting. There's sort of multiple skill sets, right? There's the problem solving and all that, but there's also the, and I can just speak from the Army, when you're sitting out in the cold and you're hungry and you're wet and all those kind of things, you just learn to deal with it and accomplish the mission. And it doesn't matter if you're special forces or you're doing anything, you're usually out in the elements and it's crazy. And again, I wasn't like the snake eater elite guy. I was an artillery guy, right? I served a couple of different roles in that, but you're out in the elements, you're uncomfortable. And I think being an entrepreneur is about getting out of your comfort zone more often than not, either from a risk perspective or engaging people or presenting or doing any of that. And you just get used to testing your own boundaries and dealing with things and just moving through. And it's interesting. It's like a fish in water for us. But then you talk to other people and they're like, wow, this is just what we did, man. Right. This is just what our military is trained to do.
Yeah, no doubt about it. One of the things I had to learn how to do was how to speak commander, because if I can't communicate, look, you can write all the intel reports you want. If you're not
Yeah.
impacting how the commander makes decisions, if the staff is like, fuck that guy, we're not going
Right.
to, we don't
Right.
believe, And so I realized that what we all picture is like, I'm sneaking around and I'm listening to stuff or whatever, and I'm tricking people into telling me things. And, there's some of that stuff in there, but more than anything, I had to build an audience for what I was writing, because if I wasn't communicating well enough to be valuable to the staff, to the commander, to the sergeant major, I may as well go home.
Right.
Like, and that's a lesson that I continue to try to implement here in my business now. I get a lot of advice on what to do, but this is me talking, this would be like me being an ineffective intel guy talking to Pete, the business guy. And if all my friends are like, what you ought to do is, you see, and then you get on, Twitter, you make a podcast, all these different things. And so the lesson in reverse is like, how do I be relevant to these people so that when I do write something, when I do create something, when I make a knife, there's bona fides in that, because I've spent the time to build up the market, the weight, the wasta, if you will, from Iraq.
Yeah, I think actually for me with the knife, an interesting component of it was, I am not a detail guy, right? I said I was ADD. I got diagnosed with that late in life, which was kind of funny, but I'm not a finish guy. I don't have the patience or the skill set to really make these beautiful handcrafted knives. I would love to. It's the same. I'm terrible at music. I've tried so many instruments. That's just not me. So I think that actually helped me, because I didn't have this attachment to what a knife should be. And I was solving a problem as opposed to making a knife. And I've really started, one of my partners it was interesting. We were talking one day and he was like, I don't think this is an invention, or I don't think this is a knife. It's an invention. And it's a nuance, but I think it was really sort of this disruptive thing to say, geez, I'm surely not going to make a living doing this, and I'm not really going to make an impact doing this, but I can here. And I was so close to it with my own issues that it ended up being like a great fit.
Yeah. I get it. Let's go back to it a second. We were kind of off mic. We were talking a little bit about getting advice, and like, hey, you ought to have a podcast. You go through this is a great thing. So you go through a startup, right? And this is great that people are putting you through an accelerator and everything. So externally, a guy like me will come to Accelerator and say, hey, why don't you let me help you guys do some media training and show these guys what podcasts look like, give them an episode, and they'll give me a fair piece of money for that work. Not a lot, but let's get these guys running faster. Instead, it's like, you should start a podcast. And it's the last thing you need to do. I mean, maybe you should spend money on PR and get your message out in a different way, and then maybe come back around. But we get a lot of conflicting advice. And, I want people to start podcasts, but I want them to start them for the reason that this is a networking device. This is a marketing tool. This is a PR tool, whatever it's going to be. But we don't often hear that. We just hear the good idea. And then, by the way, reveal that, hey, producing a podcast takes about 200 hours a month. Like,
Yeah.
Time for that, Yeah. So how do you allocate your time? How do you continue to, like, I'd love to ask, I live in Southern California, so a lot of people are in the entertainment business, and all of us wear too many hats. And all of us know which hat we hate wearing. Like, you're not a detail guy. We get that same thing. I'm like, you said put stickers on the car. There are the stickers. Like, they're crooked. You know what you said? You said put stickers on the car. I'm on to the next task.
Right.
So how do you allocate what's going to be important? How do you stay ahead? How do you not replicate somebody else's work? How do you find resources to have somebody else do things that you don't or can't do well?
Well, and this is going to get a big head nod from you, because what I did, first thing, I have the luxury of being an older founder. And I think that it changes sort of the dynamics of what you're trying to get out of it. I want to make money. I want to be successful, but I'm not looking to secure my future the same way, because I'm 54, right? Like, there was always a finite amount of time. It's a visible finite amount of time now. So I've built a team of all people like myself who are really good and accomplished, a couple of other academy grads, and other people accomplished in their own things. And I've been very, very generous with things like equity, because when I find the right people, I think I look and I say, I can be penny wise and pound foolish, or I can bring these people on and all of them say, stay out of the stuff you're not good at. They're like, we're not good at this thing. And that's been the big part. And if you think, it's the same thing that we did in the military, right? Like you look at what resources you have, you build a good team, right. You try and either train or bring someone on that fills holes, and that carries into the corporate world. And that served me well. And I think the other part is NULU is part of a bigger vision. We have a plan where NULU right now is a subsidiary of a company called Red Leg Innovation that's really not a public face, but it's a venture studio that we're building to take what we've learned in NULU, make it successful. We want NULU to be a successful brand, but if we can take everything we learned as a team and help other people with adaptive products, or bring some of our other adaptive products to market, we can create a replicatable process that fills a broader need. When we were doing our market analysis, we scrapped our approach a couple of times because we looked and we said, hey, it's not about like an archetype of person, it's about a symptomatic manifestation. And that's when the light bulb went off to say, if you're looking at symptoms, then you can stack parts of the market into a larger market. Well, if we can do that repeatedly, and if we can become thought leaders on creating elegantly designed, useful, adaptive products, then that's where the long-term value is. And that could be in 5 years. We have a large uphill with NULU, just getting to where it'll be profitable. But I think every time it'll get shorter. It's not unlike any other technology, but it's a consumer product, which is always like a tougher thing. Getting funded in this day and age is difficult if you're something like what we're doing. But I think if we can broaden where the value is, hopefully we can attract more investors to the space, because there's a need. And when we approached the market differently and said, you're not designing for disability. If you look at a symptomatic profile and then chart it over lifespan, we're all disabled when we're younger, and we're going to be disabled when we're older. And this is a military thinking, right? And I never thought of it until actually just now. Military is task condition standards, right? That's how you evaluate something. So if you're looking whether you're able or not able, it's that task condition and standards. But many people will say, well, I'm not disabled, but I wear knee braces. Guess what? You're wearing those for some reason. So by doing that, we think we can attract even more to that market and create a different view of ability and disability, where it's a scale as opposed to a binary approach. And with that, hopefully adaptive becomes what we're all doing. Like, adaptive just means smart, but our egos get in the way. I'm not going to use it. It doesn't a knife, right? There's a guy on TikTok right now who I'm having a conversation with who is talking about, I murdered a Kiwi in a video, and it was overripe, but and he was very, very attached to like the shape of a knife. He said, I've been cutting fruit for this long, and it's the wrong thing, but he's never used our tool, right? So that's where people look and they're like, it looks different. It's different. I'm giving up something by doing it, as opposed to accepting that even when we're in our best health, if you hurt your arm, you're disabled for a certain amount of time. But because it's temporary, people don't give it the thought that they should.
Yeah. And there's zero people in line waiting. Man, I hope someone comes to me with a semi-hemispherical shaped knife today. Boy, that'd be great.
Right. And it's just, and the ULU is out there, and it's interesting, right? There's the knife people who go, it doesn't look like a knife. And I'm like, well, the last time I had to stab somebody in the kitchen is never. So why do you need a linear knife? Other people look and they say, well, it looks like an ULU, right? A lot of military guys been in Alaska, but there are inherent differences. And that's been, I think, one of our big challenges is communicating. Yeah. People understand the why. They're like, okay, I get it. Like, people have upper extremity issues. They just look and they go, wow, that looks like, some Klingon cooking weapon or something.
Right. Yeah. There is the whole ego thing, right? It gets in the way of a lot of who we are, what we do. I've got hearing aids. I'm wearing one contact.
I got mine right in right now. Right.
And my contact lens thing is because I think this eye, I need to get my lens swapped out because I see great through it. All of a sudden, my eye got better about 8 months ago. But then I realized I have this, I have some kind of blockage here, whether it's, I can't diagnose this myself,
Right.
right? But maybe it's a cataract. And so I went to the doctor, the VA, and they're like, hey, maybe you've got a tumor in there. And I'm like, tumor? How did you start a tumor? Like, well, your vision got better. I'm like, but I also can't see out of the eye because
Right.
it's like a smear on it. They're like, well, maybe you have a cataract.
Right. Right.
So I'm adapting right now, but it's peak adaptation because it takes a while to get all of my things lined up. But if they came out with a pair of glasses or whatever it is, that would help me to see in the settings, different settings. And if it was a matter of getting a brand new lens on my eyeball, boy, that's an adaptation. And so you just got to get over like the vanity part of hearing aids. Who cares, right? Like
I got the Bluetooth ones. I love it.
I do. Yeah,
It's
me too.
awesome.
I think, yeah. And so we are part cyborg now, right? Being
That- you know,
I am a
and
cyborg.
I think and we made a very conscious effort to focus on the needs based part. We have sort of an adaptive, assistive, adjacent approach to how we design product.
Mhm.
Adaptive first because they get it, right? We've been working and engaging with adaptive offices around the country. Each state has one. They're really amazing resource, but they look and they're like, totally get it. We want to evaluate it. Because they're gaining something. If you have a need,
Right.
you're gaining with an adaptive product. If you can still do a job with a little bit of discomfort, and then you
Mm.
move to an adaptive thing, you feel like you're losing something. And I think there's this inflection point where the juice is worth the squeeze to get the adaptive product. But
Mm.
one thing that we're really trying to communicate with people, if you go to talk to an orthopedic surgeon or a physical therapist, they love people who work in the kitchen, butchers and stuff like that, because they see a lot of them because over time, repetitive stress injuries.
Yeah.
So we've got a sort of secondary approach that says, hey,
Mhm.
if it helps someone who needs it, guess what? The people who need it probably need it because of repetitive stress injuries, things like that.
Right.
I mean, there are other
Right.
conditions, but the most prominent are, arthritis, carpal tunnel, all that. Well, with that, if people can come to accept, hey, I'm not losing something. I'm not aging without a fight, right? Like I think that's
Mm.
where they say, okay, when I give up a knife that looks like a knife, I might as well get a walker, right? And you get this thing, and it's interesting because my wife and I have had and I'll say it's opportunity to be caretakers. My dad lived with us for several years here. Her dad lived with us for a while. He's currently in the hospital, but he might end up back here. And you look at these old guys who don't want to use a walker, for instance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you go, well, wait a minute, like, is a fall better? And some people will wait until they have a fall because they feel somehow the walker saps their independence and who they are, as opposed to keeping their independence.
Yeah.
So it's really been, when you talk about advice from all kinds of places, and I was for part of my time as an artillery guy. Artillery is the only branch that has their own intel guys. So I was the intel officer for a while, and I think the one thing I did learn from that is, you've got information out there, and you can either help validate or not what you've got, right, in your mind as the way to go. And I think what I'm starting to really learn on the entrepreneurial side is advice is information, and and you'll totally get this, is there are more and more times where I'm talking to people who are giving me advice, and I'm thinking to myself, you don't really understand at all what we're like, oh, you should do this. And you're like, no, that's completely counter. But that's where you look and you say, what they're telling me is they don't get it. Right. So the
Yeah.
conversation could change. And it's well, why do you think that's a better way to do it? As opposed to going, you're wrong. Right. And I think that's the other nice part about age, right? Like, I think when you get into your 50s, especially, it's not about ego anymore. It's not about, right. I don't care if I'm right. I don't even care anymore. Well, I was talking to my team one day, and my designer, their chief design officer, goes, he said something like, how do you feel about how much it's changed and how everybody's now part of where this is going and you're not the person in control anymore? And I said, I ceased to be that person when people joined this organization. And I
Yeah.
think when you can let all that go and your ego disappears, getting advice is a lot easier because it's all well-intentioned good advice. It's
Yeah.
just not always helpful in the journey.
Yeah. You know, you're right. I resonate with a lot of that. And one of the things, my friends are desperate to help me and they don't understand, like, why don't you have a million followers? Well, because people like Jason Bateman exist and they are huge celebrities and they also have shows. And so we all get into the arena and I've got to find my own way to do this. And so when they tell me what I ought to do is, and I appreciate all that stuff. And a lot of times I do it, or I have done it. I have tried that thing. But when push and shove come together, I'll look at them and I'll say, do you want to help me? You want to see me succeed? You see me working hard? Well, then go to my PayPal and put $5 in a month.
Yep.
And then they're like, oh, and I'm like,
yeah.
Listen, that is the pipeline to my pocket.
Right.
And I'm not, you see me, you just said, you see me working hard. And so that's when I start to sell people on that aspect of like, if you want to help me, this is the place where I need help. I learned this from commanders. I don't need you to tell me what to do, Pete. All I need you to do is tell me how my machine is working.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then maybe every now and then help me understand some detail of that. But it's okay to not want to help me do my show. It's okay if you're against but now I'm talking about their issue with my product, so I can get better at trying to say, why don't you do? Or do you spend $5 on anything that you're not using the subscription on at all? Yeah, I got 20. Oh, I'll take that 20.
Right.
Give it to me, and at least it's me.
No,
and it gets them thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So when someone wants to buy a NULU knife and they're not sure how to do it, even if they aren't sure they even want to buy it, but your job is to go, yeah, why don't you buy one? Like, what's your pitch? How do you get them to
I'm
get
a
off the
visual
fence?
guy. It's a visual product. You have to see it in action. The number of people, it's funny because sometimes the advice is good, right? People, you should get on Shark Tank. You should get on Home Shopping Network. I'm like, great, introduce me to somebody. Yeah. But it is a cool product because there's so many different ways you can use it. It's hard because the paradigm of thousands of years of how you use a knife is in people's brain. And the funny thing about it, frankly, is that most people don't even use a knife correctly based on culinary use, me being one of them. I had a chef come over one day. He was trying it out and he showed me a regular knife and he goes, you're using it wrong. I said, I'm holding it by the handle. Because chefs don't hold it by the handle unless they're cleaving. You hold it here like in a pinch grip. And I'm like, then what's the handle for? He said, balance. I'm like, this is why the NULU exists. So I think it's visual. I am launching my own YouTube channel. My daughter's helping me with it. I've embraced a little bit generationally how these kids consume. I think the election taught, whatever side, where people are going, where they consume media. And as a result, I felt I was missing some things. So I'm really trying to push into the visual social media platforms, and especially YouTube, because I found out it's the largest streaming platform. You think Netflix, it's like 10% of the market is YouTube, but people go to YouTube for long form demonstration type videos, which lends itself real well. So I think right now it's going to be getting to where we sort of get some inertia there. We should have product in spring, February, March timeframe. The tariff stuff has thrown a little monkey wrench into sort of our timing, not necessarily what the ending, but it'll be when it's out there in the kitchens and everything around the country. We're hoping that people will send us about how they're using it. My daughter had never used it, and she was home, and we're launching some videos in the next week when we were cooking together. And she used it a way I had never seen. And I was like, wow, like that is cool. And that's where we're sort of coming up with sort of more of a vibe and a culture around it where, how do you NULU, or the knife that adapts to you, in that there is no right way to do it. We sometimes look at it like when you buy an exercise machine and they give you that poster that you'll never look like, right? Like, or that I'll never look like with the, tough guy. But it shows basic exercises and safety. Like the really important things, like don't put your fingers where the weights go and all that. But hey, here's basic things you can do: chest, shoulder, blah, blah, blah. But like I've got one of those total gyms, right? And I'm like, oh, this is kind of like the NULU in that I can do whatever I want on this because it's really open-ended. Yeah. That's really what we want to bring to this. And we want people to show us how they use it. And better yet, tell us what improvements that we can make in future versions or future releases, because it really is conceptually, it doesn't end with this knife. And we've got a nice roadmap down the way to do that as well.
I love it. I love it. I'm ambidextrous, right? And so a lot of knives, it doesn't seem like it, are handed. And
Yes.
you would think, no, this knife isn't handed, and it looks exactly the same. But the way it functions, you have to do something to adapt to that knife.
Yes.
And so it's not all knives, but there's a lot of knives because I'll grab it, and I don't know what hand I'm going to grab something with. My hand just grabs it, and then I'm like, oh, and it's always left-handed. I'm like, oh, this knife isn't left-handed. It's
Right.
the craziest thing.
Yes. No, I mean,
yeah.
weight and things really make a difference. And it's funny when you say you're ambidextrous, because I always used to use my mouse in my left hand and do stuff with my left hand. My family would be like, why are you doing that? And I was like, hey, you never know when you might have to use your other arm. And oddly enough, right, I was out for, a long time after shoulder reconstruction. So you're lucky to be ambidextrous.
Yeah. Well, so let's go back to that. I had my ankle rebuilt this past February, and then it got an infection in April. And oh my gosh, that was awful. But I had to stage up my adaptation. So first we started with crutches, and I'm like, oh my gosh, crutching is hard. I'm already exhausted because my body's trying to heal my leg. It's a pretty significant surgery. And so I'm like, there's no way I can crutch anywhere. I'm just going to lay in bed. And then I got a knee scooter. And then I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness for that, because that thing was great. And then all of a sudden I'm like, this is awful. Like it also exhausts me because I'm going further, but I'm still using all my energy up, and it was wrecking my knee. The knee you rest on, it just so much pressure.
So they can do that one next.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so that thing became cumbersome, and I was desperate to get to the next level, which was the boot. And I'm like, man, it's so great having this boot. And then as my body got healthier, I'm like, I cannot wait to get this stupid boot off of my foot.
Right.
And so I graduated up this ladder. But it is funny how when you're forced to be completely dependent on somebody else to take a shower, and then taking a shower would wipe me out. I'd be like, I'm running out of energy. We got to hurry up. And so we'd have to like wrap it up the whole showering thing, because I only had so much time before I had to go lay down again because my leg just required so much of my energy. It's amazing when you think about that. And so the little wastes of energy was what I became aware of. Like if I position my body carefully, I'm a little more aware of what I'm doing. And when I first got my boot off and I could walk around, and walking is one of the best ways for me to rehabilitate, I had to pay attention to every step at first because I didn't want to roll my ankle and I didn't want to step on it. And so, oh my gosh, there were so many things. And then I didn't have to do that as much. And so the adaptations became less and less, but now I'm a lot more aware of what I am doing with my body in a space. Because
well, and you're like a textbook case of like why we are focused on the needs group, right? The people who need it. And there was a classmate of mine who I spoke to, actually, I'm sorry, the husband of a classmate of mine who has MS, and he was talking about the huge, and I'm paraphrasing, the huge impact of small improvements. Yeah. And that's kind of what you're talking about. And as we've gotten deeper into the disabled market, it's super interesting because, and that's to include seniors, right? Because I think seniors by definition. But the degree that the heavily disabled folks, the ones who really, really, their day is a challenge, are some of the most innovative people out there. And it really is amazing that there hasn't been more like sucking in of investment and innovation. They're masters of PVC pool noodles, like all this kind of stuff that they create is really amazing. And you look and you say, God, a lot of this can be commercialized, because there are also people like you who will have temporary situations who are like, man, this sucks. And they'll spend money on this stuff. So, it really is a change to people's thinking. And I think, unfortunately, the change needs to come with a direct connection, right? I was reading recently today, I haven't seen Wicked, I probably won't, but just not my thing. But there is a character in it who they made in a wheelchair, right? And it's no big deal. Like, I don't think that there's anything in the script that said either way. They just chose to do that. And the degree that people are being terrible about it is amazing. How just cruel people can be. But those same people, when put in a wheelchair, all of a sudden would be like, oh yeah, that was a pretty crappy way to do it. And I think that that goes back kind of full circle. Why we're looking at the
Mm.
scale is to say, hey, we're all that far from being in a wheelchair ourselves, but for what our luck or whatever goes. And I think we have to be better at understanding that, because again, father time wins. And I think if
Yeah.
more people can accept that and understand that capabilities will wane, and the degree that we can all look at this that process, but also understand that there's people every day who have that issue, that really should drive people's understanding, acceptance, and support of that community.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a movie called The Remarkable Life of Ibelin. It's a documentary. And this puts you in the right headspace when you think about, like, oh, there's a guy with this or with that, in this setting. One of the things that's great about America is that we support that. Like, you can have, so maybe 2 months ago, I did a show with a guy who runs a studio here in Southern California. And one of the things they do is they just focus on kids with different needs, and make them into actors, singers, whatever it's going to be. And legitimately, like, this isn't like babying. This is like, okay, this is how you become an actor. And then they act as an agent for them. And so if the role calls for some kid to have Down syndrome, they have professional actors there. They act as their agent, but also that kid's agent. So when they go into the scene, they can set everything up because they get to know each other. That's an amazing adaptation, is to say, you're not incapable. I had another guy named VR Feroz, and he runs an organization that's like, I don't care how we'll say impaired you are from autism, Asperger's, whatever it is. If you want to earn money, if you want to have a professional validity, then we're going to help you figure it out, whether it's coding or something else that you do. Right. Even if you're nonverbal, it's like giving, and he talks about giving them the dignity of being able to earn their own money. We're great at that here in this nation. Yes, some people are shitty about it, that kind of thing. But the reality is we do understand that people can do things. And so this kid, Ibelin, I believe, so that was his name in, I think it was World of Warcraft, one of those kind of alternate universe kind of places. And so on this planet where he lived, he had muscular dystrophy or something akin to that. And he became more and more disabled as he went along. He had some adaptive tools to use his fingers, but he could run around in this world and be a person who fell in love. He was a person who was looked up to. He gave advice. And so he had this whole world that, because it's gaming and you just see a guy laying there in a chair, barely moving his fingers, his parents didn't understand. They knew he loved gaming, and it was like what he decided he wanted to do, because the real world didn't fit his needs. So he was completely free in this alternate world. And if you're able-bodied like I am, you don't think about that. Like, yeah, sure, I'll play some games for fun, but that's not going to be my whole life. For him, it was a better life in a lot of ways.
Right. Well, and we're actually hoping you touched on something where the parents noticed the child doing that. And we're really hoping that the gift space becomes part of what we're doing, or the caretaker space, because, as I said, my father did like to cook, as an example, but that kind of stuff gets hard. And the degree that the sandwich generation is in a really tough spot, right? Like, I've got two in college, one at home, and I was caretaker at a certain time. And you're juggling all this kind of stuff, and any time that you can give back to somebody who you're taking care of, regardless of how where they fall on what we call our ability scale, right? On the ability curve. Regardless of that, anything that you give someone independence for means that you're not doing it. And we are actually hoping in 2025, 2026 to really engage the kids market. I was fortunate enough to be at a Chamber of Commerce event recently with folks from Gigi's Playhouse, great organization helping kids with Down syndrome. And they were like, this is amazing for the kind of kids we help. And I hadn't really thought of that as much when we were launching. They're in our list of the adaptive things, but I should have realized, because the parents of kids with these issues really do look at it and want their children to be so independent as they can get. So we are hoping that if it's not the adoption of the user, it's the adoption of someone who loves them and really wants them to have their best life. And crazily enough, like when I've had a couple of times, I've set up a table where we're showing off the prototypes. You'll have people walk up, and it is sandwich generation. People, they're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to buy one for my mom and one for myself too, because I'm starting to get up there in age. So that was really our original market, was like 50 plus, sandwich generation, sort of the downslope of the ability curve where, you're leaving the mortal coil within, 30 decades.
Right. Yeah. I'm gonna
I'm
put a
sorry,
link
30
to
years,
the
3 decades.
whatever, however many. Hey, you never know nowadays.
Yeah.
The Jarvik 27 heart. The
Oh
newer one.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the Jarvik 7 is one I'm talking about, like future, that and the iterate to the newer one. I'm going to put the link for the episode with Feroz VR in there, because that, anybody who's got neurodiversity in their family, to understand that there's someone out there, it's like, hey, let's get your kid making real money. And some of these guys, their obvious inability, much like Ibelin, becomes an ability in a given setting. And so the ability to hyper focus, or an incredible memory that's developed over years because of some other incapacity. Wow. So
Well,
there's that episode down there.
and in our space, it's even just the desire to do simple tasks, right? Like
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
that there's a lot of grandiose stuff that's out there, and it's true, but sometimes it's just this one person who says, I would like to be able to cook a meal for myself. And you
Yeah.
look and you're like, God, that's Maslow's, right? Maslow's hierarchy,
Mhm.
shelter,
Yeah.
heat, and you take for granted, anytime someone out there who is high up on our ability scale, right, like a 9 or a 10, is ordering food. Imagine if that's all you could do. There was
Yeah.
a chef who has Parkinson's, who we engaged, and there was a language barrier, so it didn't work out. But I asked her, and I said, what are you going to do when it becomes, too hard to hold a knife? And it was really order food, or process food, and that will happen. Everybody eventually will be dependent, but
Yeah.
if you can stave that off, it's so beneficial.
Yeah. Are you still promoting the Kickstarter? Should I put a link
We
for
are.
that
Our
up in here?
Kickstarter's going for another 2 weeks. And we sort of had it for 2 weeks. Again, being an older entrepreneur, I'm lucky that my partners and I have money to put in, and we can continue to bootstrap. We had some pretty good stretch goals, and I'm still optimistic that we'll get to our stretch goals. But we're pretty much on track. We're about 77% of the way there with 2 weeks left. We do offer discounts for a hero tier that we have for veterans, first responders, and law enforcement, as well as food service people. Because in our world, the food service people are the ones that get the carpal tunnel, and they get the arthritis, and they get the tennis elbow from their job. So in our world, those are heroes, because when you sit down and eat a meal, those are the people that do it. So those are our 4 heroes that we 4 hero classifications. We also have an impact tier. So if somebody, I think Giving Tuesday is coming up, people who donate to charities that align with what we do, and basically it's anything, right? MS, Parkinson's, and to include indigenous cultures, because we do recognize that while we are an invention, it's sort of, the NULU has been out there for a long time, and while we have brought innovation to it and created a new invention, there is a lineage and prior art there. And so people who donate to those, if they provide proof of a donation, and we wanted it to be in this year, but obviously if they're supporting one of our causes, we're fine. There's also an impact tier for them where we'll validate that they donated, and we'll give them the discount. We find it rare that anybody would try and use that and not have donated. But if someone's donating to an organization anyhow, we want to reward that with a discount. We're unable to donate directly because Kickstarter doesn't allow that. But we also happen to, it's funny, you talk about a challenge and figuring out a good way to do things. We didn't want to have a horse in that race. We figure we can drive philanthropy to the causes that we connect with better by letting people pick where in those causes they want to include veterans and disabled veteran organizations. So between those, we're hoping we're covering the entire of the veteran community, but also as many of the communities that we want to help with the NULU, we hope we can help in other ways.
Yeah, well, as soon as I can get off this damn show, I'm going to jump in on the Kickstarter and kick in a little bit myself, because I believe in supporting the folks if I can, when they come on the show, because I dig what you're doing. Looking at the video, I see that like you can not only rock the thing, right? And I guess I could probably grab a video or something, but
Yeah.
you also can kind of use it like a smash knife or something.
Yeah, you can basically the only thing you can't do, like it's not a bread knife. Anything that's going to be, so if you were holding it, I've got one. Can I go grab a plastic one?
Yeah, you want you to go grab
Let
one
me
and
go
I'll do
grab
my
one.
job over here. Hey everybody, this is Pete from the Break It Down Show. Here's the best way to support the show. Go to Break It Down Show, and the best way is to click on PayPal, and then just do a little donation each month. $5,
Sorry about
$10
that.
goes a long way. Yeah, no worries. I'm doing my commercial.
There you go.
People.
So these
That's
were
how you
some of
support the show.
These were some of the early 3D printed prototypes. And the cool thing, I got to call out my chief design officer again, because this was all built. We just got our first production blade from the manufacturer. The rest of this was done in my garage and at his house with a 3D printer. And I bring it to things and people are like, God, where did you have it made? I'm like, 70 Bluff Road in Trout Valley. Because, that's so, this is an older one. It's there's some changes to it, but you really couldn't cut bread, right? Because your knuckles are going to get in the way. And it would be hard to carve meat, but we figured this over Thanksgiving. A lot of times it's recommended that you remove the breast and then cut it on a cutting board anyhow. So really the only limitation is the distance here. And it's it's not great for certain pairing and things like that. But really there's a couple main grips, right? So there's this grip, which we call the main grip, where you can cut forward, you can cut back, you can chop, and you can use a hammer. We call this the hammer grip. It's just a variation. But you can see most of it is and I'm sitting in a weird way, but it's a very natural, linear thing with your body. And this is the control area and the cutting area. But then you can turn it, you can cleave. And there is, if people go to my social media, I went to cleave a thigh from the, what was it? I think it was the thigh from the leg on the turkey. And I cleaved through that and the cutting board. So the force that is transferred versus, you get a cleaver, but it was like a straight punch down and it split the cutting board. So for someone who's got issues, so you can cleave and then you can cut this way, you can cut this way, and then you can precision cut. And what I'm actually learning are these edges are really good for starting a cut and then finishing it. So really, there is no right way, right? When I was talking about how do you have like a poster or something? Or do we define, like when I said we'd have like a poster of the different ways you can hold it, those are just the ways I do it. Other people are going to have other ways. And we're actually adding an aperture here, aperture, is that right? Here for things like accessories. It'll be able to, you can hang it to avoid contamination. And we have on the Kickstarter and also on our social, the sheath is going to be amazing. It's going to click into there. So really a useful tool, but so many different ways that you can use it. Again, there are a couple really specialized knives that we're just never going to replace. But a very specialized knife for most people in the kitchen, I would challenge to find out who actually owns those really specialized knives, where this probably replaces 4 or 5 knives in your kitchen already and probably does it better. So at that point, having a couple of specialized knives isn't too much of a big deal.
How is it on sharpening and staying sharp?
You know what? It is not bad. I use just a pull-through sharpener. We're going with a pretty slim blade, a pretty slim piece of metal, and the pull-through sharpeners have gotten pretty good. So you gotta pull it through here. Actually, there's a video on YouTube that I did of sharpening it with just an Amazon 3-stage pull-through sharpener that I think that's the one where I murdered the kiwi. So people can comment on that, but not hard to sharpen.
Yeah.
And again, a lot safer too, even to sharpen, because you're not, anytime you've got something extended, there's ways that you can go where it's sort of lack control and you can really pull it through. So it's, we're not trying to create something that creates a maintenance nightmare for people. It would be hard with a whetstone. I think sharpening it that way would be difficult, but sharpening any knife with a whetstone it's a job.
It's a labor of love. It's a labor of love if you like those kind of things. For sure. So everybody, if you're watching, if you go down to the in the comments, you see the link down below. You just go to Kickstarter, type in NULU Lives Knives. You're going to find it. You guys know how to do these things. When
We're the
I
only one.
eat a key, yeah, you're the only one, right? So when I eat a kiwi, I just monkey bite it. I
Yeah.
don't need a knife. I just eat the whole damn thing.
I like
But
that.
yeah, you know, yeah, I was going to ask you when you are looking at the way forward, like we all have a butcher block full of knives in our kitchen.
Right.
That's very common. Is there a NULU family of knives then
Yes,
to come out?
absolutely.
Okay.
We have a sport that's we have a sport and a youth one on our roadmap today. And we're going to keep developing. The really cool thing about it is, without going into kind of what's under the hood, the way that this is constructed and the reason that, because the force transfer is so pure, right? If you think of this as the center of a circle where you're gripping it, and these as radii along an arc, the handle doesn't feel the stress that a normal handle would. So on our roadmap, but yet undefined what improvements there will be, are specialized handles for different types of people who have different needs, right? You've got the confluence of different symptomatic issues where there's similarities, but there's also differences, right? Like I have a video on my YouTube where I'm testing out a machete and I cut a piece of wood in half. My kids loved it. But I can do rough things like that, right? Because it's more my core, and my arm is at the mercy of my core. But when I do detailed things, that's where the arthritis and all the other stuff kicks in. Well, my issue could be grip. Someone else's could be tremors or things like that. So we've got all different handle thought in terms of where, like, is it something where it's easier to hold on to and to grip more securely? So that's part of the roadmap, where there will be either a swappable handle or other knives that have the capabilities of further helping individuals, and then all the accessories. I think that I have an apron that I have put together that's sort of an adaptive apron. It's got some Velcro and stuff on it. And I'm now kind of looking and saying, well, is sort of NULU an experiential thing beyond the knife too, right? Where it's all about, if you have an issue, right? I have bad knees and stuff. I don't love to move around the kitchen to go get other stuff. Well, great. If everything's right here, then I have it. So really looking at other ways to make the kitchen adaptive.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love hearing that. I'm thinking about other chefs that I've had on the show, and getting their thoughts about it. Do you have an ambassador program right now, or are you guys?
We're trying to. The big part with chefs that we've had is, because it's such a skilled profession that is built upon years, there is, I think, even more of a resistance than with regular people, because it's an investment in sort of that identity. So we haven't yet found the chef who looks and says, I'm going to jump on a sort of a side thing and come back by saying, we look at it and say, cooking's about the food. It's not. Someone once said to me, I want to look like a chef when I cook. Well, why do you want to look like a chef? No one cares. Like, that's about ego, the food, and sitting around and sharing stories and laughter and fun.
Sure.
That's the part that is what we think is what needs to stay in the kitchen for people who have issues, or be brought into the kitchen for people who've never had that capability. So for us, it really is about democratizing it, which doesn't always work with a chef, right? Because a chef might look and say, hey, it's kind of like when I had to wear a suit all the time when I was in banking, because people expect you to wear a suit. Chefs are kind of the same thing. And I may be generalizing, but we haven't yet gotten that traction. Sure. I will say that we are always on the lookout. So if there are any chefs out there, we do have an evaluation program, and we are looking for ambassadors. We're also looking for ambassadors in the OT-PT space. That's a huge part, because they, I think, represent this this trusted advisor for people with those issues. And we had one. Unfortunately, she became ill, so she's not with us. But she's alive. She's not with the company. But we're always looking for more ambassadors, and then people in those communities that can use it, especially influencers in the culinary space who have disabilities. We would love to connect with you and get you an evaluation model and hopefully collaborate.
Yeah. Well, I got a couple of people I'm thinking of. I don't know if you know Magdog Maggart. He was in the military a couple of different ways. Most notably, he was the guy that pulled over one day and ended up changing Colin Powell's tire.
No kidding.
And
no, I don't know him.
Yeah, and he developed an infection in his leg, and so when he got out, he's an amputee, but he's a chef, and so he might be a fun guy to have on, and it's on brand because of the
man. Listen, if you can make any introductions, that's the other thing. The advice is great from people, but the degree that I get introduced to other people, it really is amazing. And again, everybody really seems generous. I think I've got a little bit of the halo effect with the company in that it just we're doing something that everybody can get behind.
Right.
There's no politics in it. It's sort of a universal good to want people to be independent and own their health and well-being and diet and nutrition. Like nobody looks and says, God, I can't believe you're doing that. Just nobody necessarily wants to write a check. And that's the hard part.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's a lot of fun talking about this, and I love seeing other entrepreneurs, especially military entrepreneurs, doing things, adaptive things. And you're right, sandwich generation's fully in bloom. And one of the things you do see is you worry about your most seasoned people in your family. And you see them cooking and leaning on things, and you're like, oh my gosh, we have got to get these knives out of your hands, because it is harder to control. If your hand is shaking when you're drinking coffee, but you can get coffee into your mouth, that's fine, right? But if your hand is shaking and you've got a butcher knife or a chef's knife, it becomes a little bit more dangerous. And that thing looks like that's a lot easier to hold.
And safety is a huge part of it. So you'll see, again, these are two different prototyps. But if you look at this one, tip, and this one, we changed it. So it's a clip front, in that there's no tip on it, which makes it safer, right? Because if you drop a knife or something, right, you can go through your foot or something. With this, there's no chance of stabbing yourself. So we're really big on the safety part of it too, because it should be something that's safe. You shouldn't be like watching your elder family members, like, where you're going to have to go to the emergency room, right? So we've really taken on safety. One of the ones that came out of nowhere, we were talking to an adaptive office, and they were like, have you thought about vision impaired? And I was like, vision impaired? Like, no, we're not putting a knife in the hand of someone who's vision impaired. And their answer was like, why not? They have to cook too, but because of control, exactly where you're cutting, and there's no wrist play. They said this would be amazing for the vision impaired. So safety's become a big part of it, and that's going to become something huge when we pivot to the kids market. That'll be a huge part of it, because we have gotten people who say, again, why would you put the knife in the hands of a kid? We say, well, because eventually you're going to have to. If we can bring that down to where they're becoming more part and more in tune with their diet earlier, this is what we need when you've got the number of obese kids in our country today. The degree that they can own cooking and not eating processed food is going to be what happens. And our long-term hope is, if we can capture the sandwich generation and older, and then catch the kids younger, right? Because a lot of the sandwich generation are going to be grandparents maybe of these kids, or maybe even parents in some cases. We've just got that middle section. And that middle section, we're hoping, as these kids get older, then we can really redefine how cutting is done. And people will look back and say, man, I knew that guy who totally redefined cutlery in a way that never, that hopefully will be the legacy that I can leave, is that people have a better experience in the kitchen and are more healthy.
I got a link to the Dan Toombs. He's from California originally, now lives in Great Britain, and he is the curry guy, and so he's very successful.
He's
a very. No, I don't think he's a veteran. It's possible that he is, but he, he's just a guy that I met because my people from California are like, oh my gosh, my cousin is the curry guy, and these guys on the
that's
chef
cool.
show, and yeah, and so just in general, I'm always trying to direct people to other people that are doing great things, and he's got wonderful cookbooks and a wonderful show, and he makes Indian food completely accessible. So, another guy that I'd love to introduce you to.
That we're trying to, when you say ambassadors and strategic partnerships, we are actually trying to find a good potential AI partner because, I'm not a fine chef. I'm not a recipe book kind of guy, but I can look in my pantry and go, man, this stuff would be good together. And I think that AI is going to change a lot of. There's already a couple of good platforms out there. So the degree that you can bring the virtual and the physical together, right? The ability to say, hey, I want to bring this flavor profile and I really don't want to mess around with the cookbook. And here's what I got in my thing. And oh, you know what? I can cook because my arm doesn't hurt. The marrying of that hopefully is something that we can leverage at some point. There's a few players out there right now. And I think that's going to be a big shift to where things go.
Well, I have a guy for that too. His name is Brad Hutchings. I'm putting a link to his episode on here as well. He's a good friend of mine. He works in the AI space, and he'll tell you the thing he does is like, is this even possible? Are we going to throw a bunch of money down the well trying to chase the next?
Yeah, I would love an introduction.
Yeah, so I'm going to be busy sending out emails connecting you to people.
No, that's great. It's great. That's I'm sure you found the same thing when you refer somebody and give a connection and it works out for them. It's like anything else, right? Like it's more fun being generous sometimes than getting your own. Yeah.
I'm absolutely. It's one of the things going all the way back to it right before we started the show. When you have a podcast and you're like, can you monetize, or did you monetize, or how did you monetize? I sort of let that. The show is now bigger than me. And so I can point at it and say, there it is. If they don't already know about it, I can give the bona fides of the show. Forget about my bona fides.
Sure.
And they're like, yeah, I'll come on that. And you know how this is. You go on things, and all of a sudden you realize, well, there's a lot of power in that. And then my connection, or ability to go, you should know this person, you should know that person, or just being top of mind when someone's like, hey, I'm thinking about getting a Christmas gift. It is the season, and I'm going to say, why don't you go to over here? I'm going to pull this thing up. NULU Lives on social media right there, or just go to the Kickstarter link and bam,
there you go.
A gift
Right there.
Super awesome, super slick.
It won't be there by Christmas, unfortunately, but
right.
They could give them a golden ticket or something, and it should. We're anticipating again early spring. Right in time where you can cook your Easter dinner.
But if you got me a cool knife for Christmas, I'd be like, that's awesome. Dope.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to get it. And I would use that thing every damn day in the kitchen. I really would. I'd be like, I love this knife.
We are looking at the gift market too, because one of the cool things, and I hate using the plastic one instead of the real one, but it's good to illustrate, is there's a lot of real estate on here to say thank you to a client or things like that. And like in NULU, it's meant to be displayed. So our cutting board actually has a slot where it will sit on the counter displayed. So it's a great place to have a greeting for somebody. We're looking really in the corporate gift space, but there's no reason if someone's giving a gift, they couldn't get it laser engraved so that their loved one knows, hey, this is the person that really took a investment in my health.
Yeah, I love it. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this thing up?
And how can I help you out?
Click on the link down below. No, we're good, man. Just come on the show, be successful, and then opportunities will be created for both of us.
Well, I'll be sure. It's been a hugely fun interview. I will be sharing it all over the place, and then I would love for you to get me that link. I'm seeing it go by, but I don't know if I have it for your PayPal, because you've been amazingly generous for me to be able to get this out. So I hope that this gets some donations to your show as well.
This is how we do it, everybody. All right, stand by. I'll be right back to you, Doug. Everybody else, I will see you tomorrow. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much for watching.